today's video, we will learn a little about the life of Nany, who was groomed by her mother and aunt to become an Empress of Austria. But life had different plans for her. Nany went from being afraid of being a spinster to a solid and loving marriage, which unfortunately would last only 9 years. Afterwards, she spent the rest of her life in great melancholy, as the major losses she had to endure were too much for her and ruined her mental health. Helene Caroline Therese de Wittelsbach was born on April 4, 1834, in the city of Munich in the region of Bavaria, which at the time was a kingdom and currently is a state in Germany. She was the daughter of Duke Maximilian and Duchess Ludovika of Bavaria. Helena was the third daughter of the couple. Her family affectionately nicknamed her Nany. She was conservative and much more serious than the rest of her siblings. She was considered the most beautiful in her family and also grew up in contact with nature and enjoyed a freedom that very few women of her social status could enjoy. She was very loved by her family and was the eldest of all the sisters. Helene loved her father, even though he was an absent and very distant man. She also loved nature and animals. She and her sister Sissi were always very close and used to do everything together. They would take long walks through the lush forests of the region and go on excursions in the mountains. Additionally, she also really enjoyed horseback riding. Helene grew up to become a serious and very shy girl. People say she was very attractive and charitable. She liked to volunteer in hospitals, but due to her personality, she was always in the shadow of her sister Sissi, the legendary Empress of Austria. As Helene grew up and became a beautiful woman, her aunt, Archduchess Sophie, began to look for a bride for her son, Emperor Franz Joseph of Austria. To Sophia, she was the ideal woman. Although she complained that Helena had received poor education, since she never agreed with the education her sister Ludovika and her brother-in-law gave to the children. Even so, Helene's mother gave her a very good education, the best she could provide for her daughter. Helene learned French and the protocols of royalty. Helene liked the idea of marrying her cousin and felt ready for the role of Empress of Austria. In 1853, the meeting took place in the city of Bad Ischl, where the royal family used to spend their summers. Helena went to the meeting with her mother, Ludovika, and her younger sister, Sissi. There, Helene tried to get her cousin's attention and please him, but her shyness made him not notice her. On the contrary, from the beginning, he noticed her sister Sissi, with whom he fell madly in love during that visit. Helene was sidelined. Her cousin didn't sit next to her, nor did he choose her to dance at the ball. He only had eyes for Sissi. Sophia immediately noticed her son's romantic interests, and she was very displeased. After all, she preferred Helene, who was more formal and serious and was better prepared. So he tried to convince his son to reconsider his decision, but there was no way. The next day, Francisco proposed to Sissi. This event greatly affected Helene. The young woman was very disappointed and felt rejected, sinking into a deep sadness. She thought she would remain single for the rest of her life, since back then marriages were arranged early in adulthood, and she believed her chance to marry had already passed. For several years, Helene suffered greatly from the stigma of being single, at an age when, at the time, it was practically a requirement to be married. They also said that she no longer had a chance of getting married, and even she had started to believe it. Her mother, Duchess Ludovika, was eager to marry off her eldest daughter and tirelessly sought a match for Helene, who was already 22 years old. She was even afraid that her daughter might decide to join a convent. After much searching for a suitable suitor, she found a candidate, the German prince Maximilian of Thurn and Taxis. The Duchess invited him to spend a few days at the family residence at Possenhofen Palace and arranged everything for the prince and Helene to meet. They say that the first meeting between the young people was a great success. They got along very well, and the prince showed interest in her. Thus, her mother quickly started organizing everything for their union to happen. But this commitment did not please Helene's uncle, King Maximilian II of Bavaria. He thought that the prince was not a good match for his niece. Despite being from a very wealthy family, they did not rule over any territories. Therefore, the king did not consider him the ideal candidate to join the Bavarian royal family. But her sister Sissi, who at that time was already Empress of Austria, supported and helped her so that Helene's engagement could proceed, convincing the king to make the marriage happen. All this greatly improved the relationship between them, as they had drifted apart since the emperor chose Sissi to be his wife. On August 24, 1858, the wedding was celebrated at Possenhofen Palace. She was 24 years old at the time of the union, and he was 26. Before the party, Helene received a very expensive necklace from her in-laws as a sign of affection and acceptance into the family. They say the wedding was a very happy event. The party was amazing, and the couple looked very much in love. Many people think that if you compare her wedding with her sister's, hers was the happiest from the very first moment. In the end, she was well accepted by her husband's family, and they lived a happy married life. They loved and supported each other and had a very strong union. During their honeymoon, she became pregnant. This news was a great joy for both families, especially for the couple. Helene, who felt very loved and happy, exchanged many letters with her sister Sissi, who, on the contrary, felt sad and desperate, mainly because of the terrible relationship she had with her mother-in-law and Aunt Sophia. Helene always tried to help and support her sister. They really had an excellent relationship and loved each other very much. Her first daughter, Louise, was born in 1859, followed by her second daughter, Elisabeth, in 1860. Soon after the birth of the latter, Helene traveled to Corfu to visit her sister Sissi, who was very ill. When she returned, she passed through Vienna, where she informed Franz Joseph about the poor condition of his wife. The long-awaited male child, Maximilian Maria, was born in 1862, and in 1867, their last child, Albert, would be born. But when Helene was pregnant with Albert, her husband started having kidney problems. Many doctors visited them, but none of them were able to cure his illness. This worried Helene greatly, as she saw her husband's health deteriorating and it seemed that no one could help him. And so, he ended up passing away in 1867, at the age of 36. The death of her husband filled her with sorrow and sadness, as Helene was very much in love with him. It is said that she was completely devastated for a few weeks, and it seemed like her mental health was severely deteriorated. Helene tried to distract herself with charity work and managing the Turn and Taxis family business. She also spent a lot of her time taking care of her young children. In 1877, Elisabeth, her youngest daughter, married Prince Miguel II of Braganza. But she had many problems during childbirth and only got worse over time, eventually dying in 1881. Once again, Helene fell into a deep depression and profound sadness that she could not escape. On the 2nd of June in the year 1855, her son, Maximilian Maria, passed away at the age of 22 due to heart problems. This death was a definitive blow to Helene's psyche. She completely surrendered to madness. They say that sometimes she was lucid, but on many other occasions, she behaved like someone completely detached from reality, unable to accept the death of her children, acting as if they were still alive. On the other hand, At other times, she would sink into a deep sadness when she remembered their passing. Helene stopped managing the family business as soon as she saw that her son Alberto was perfectly fulfilling his role as a prince. So for a while, she decided to lock herself in a room to live in complete solitude, in isolation, to be free in her own madness. Later, she fully devoted herself to religion and charity. She eventually developed stomach cancer, and as soon as her sister learned of her health condition, she quickly traveled to be by her side. When they met, they talked a lot about their lives, the good and bad parts. Even though she was sick, Helena was very happy when her son Albert got engaged to Archduchess Margaret Clementine of Austria. At that time, she could barely eat, and when her end was very near, she received a visit from her relatives, and her sister Sissi was by her side until the end. She ended up dying in May of 1890 at 56 years old, surrounded by family. Helene was a very charitable person. She liked helping others. She was a great mother, wife, sister, and friend. She always supported her family, especially her sister, Sissi, during the toughest times. Unfortunately, she suffered great tragedies with the death of her beloved husband and children. She had a big heart. Perhaps that is why she could not withstand so much suffering.